Hello again. Welcome to another Red Cloud webinar. My name is Kobe Kushner. I'm part of the research team here at Red Cloud. And joining us today is Daniel Stolyarov. He's the president and CEO of G6 Materials, a leading graphene company. He's a super interesting guy. He's very smart. He's actually a scientist by trade. He's fluent in both English, Russian. He's got a master's in physics, a PhD in physical chemistry. Now, the company G6 Materials, they produce a wide variety of graphene-based products. Now, what is graphene? So it's a single layer of sheeted carbon atoms that are bonded together in a hexagonal formation. At the molecular level, it looks like a honeycomb pattern. And at just 1 atom thick, it's the thinnest compound known to man. Despite being 1,000 times lighter than paper, it's actually 200 times stronger than steel by weight. It conducts electricity better than any known material at room temp. It can convert light at any wavelength into a current. So because of all these unique properties, it's got such a wide variety of applications. When combined with other materials, it can be used to increase thermal stability, reduce weight while improving tensile strength, reduce flammability, the list goes on. So during today's webinar, Daniel is going to teach us more about graphene, its applications, and some of the cool things that G6 has been up to. When he's done the presentation, we'll move on to the Q&A session. Just a reminder that you can type your questions into the comment box at any time. As usual, we have to first run through the fine print. So during this webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the company's corporate deck, which we will see momentarily. And for Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. Please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on G6 Materials. And with that, I'll now turn it over to you, Daniel.
Well, thank you for your kind words and for a nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about our company. And as you mentioned, this idea behind the company is a commercialization of graphene materials. And the graphene has a lot of unique properties. It's the strongest material in the world, has the highest thermal conductivity. And 2 Russian scientists was awarded a Nobel Prize in 2010 for discovering its unique properties. What's make graphene interesting from commercial perspective that it easily shares its properties with other materials being added in tiny amount. For example, if you add graphene 1 part per 1,000 into a polymer become conductive. It also improve mechanical performance of the materials. Graphene is being considered for a number of applications, but you have to keep in mind that graphene is not a commodity. There is no graphene market per se. People are looking for a solution and hoping that graphene can be a solution. But on the other hand, just selling graphene is impossible. We need to make another step, and that's why we have the unique business model. We start working with our customer closely and trying to make sure that graphene is going to work for them. One important aspect of working with our clients is to make sure that whatever we are doing with graphene doesn't change a lot the technological processes. I guess it's true for any innovation. And that's who we are. We actually have a facility in the Ronkonkoma on Long Island. We have very well equipped laboratory and also pilot scale plant at Ronkonkoma. And we're working on development of a variety of products. And what's important, what kind of for us is that we always focused on the actual making actual product and selling them and making revenue out of graphene. And we have a lot of customers Almost every university in the world was at some point was our customers. We also work with R&D departments of commercial companies who was trying to use graphene for their products and applications. The situation actually changed drastically with us on the acquisition of GX Technologies, which I consider a very important milestone in development of the company. Originally, we met GX Technology team as a client. They asked us to help us with their project, and we started working together. And at some point, we decided to join forces and work on the some of the projects that GX Technology was working before. And with these combined forces, we have access to capital that would allow us to expand rapidly our company. And we have a team of people with a business experience who will help us to start building company more rapidly. So right now the plan is we already have a research lab, and in the research lab we can make a product and make sure it works. And what's hindered our expansion was that it's not sufficient to do a business this way, because at some point you need to make a product in some scale. And what we're planning to do right now, we're planning to expand our capacity of manufacturing of graphene oxide. And we are planning to do it in a few steps. First, we use our facility in Ronkonkoma and start a pilot plant where we test technological properties on the scale up. And finally, we are planning to actually build an industrial scale facility for manufacturing of graphene oxide. With expanding capacity, we hope to drop the price on graphene oxide, and this opens a lot of doors to many other products, because one of the problems of graphene is it's still expensive material, and it kind of hindered commercial application of graphene. An important component of GX acquisition is that our company got an option to lease an industrial plant, a site to build industrial plant for manufacturing of graphene oxide in Natchez, Mississippi. This project is heavily supported by U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They have their own idea how to use graphene oxide, and we start working with them on the very important project. With expanded graphene oxide production capacity, we're hoping to actually reach this application of graphene related to extraction of precious metals and also purification of battery materials. But even with a pilot plant, we will be able to actually expand our business, which we were working on development for more than a decade. Air purification, it's one of the projects that was triggered by this pandemic. Air purifiers is actually a device that's recommended by Center of Disease Control for virus mitigation. And we start working on this project, and we found a way how to use graphene oxide to make these air purifiers more efficient against viruses. Recently, our filter was tested by a third-party laboratory, and we found that it's 99.9% efficient against bacteria and viruses. So originally, the first project in this industry, we're planning to make a office air purifier just to test the idea and the product. But later, we think that we can address with the same technology. We can find actually supply filters for third-party, for other brands, and also this technology can be formulated for industrial air purification, for large buildings, and for already existing HVAC systems. Another important project that we were hoping to expand with the expanded capacity for graphene oxide production is our conductive adhesives. It has graphene with formulation of conductive adhesive, making unique, especially we can make flexible conductive adhesives. The problem is usually conductive adhesives, it's an epoxy loaded with silver particles, and silver make the transition between conductive and non-conductive state very sharp. Adding graphene makes it smoother, and it allows a lot of application. Those applications include solar cells, flexible electronics. It's actually for the flexible electronics, our material is an enabling technology, because otherwise there is not possible to find another material that works the same way. So just to give a highlights what happened recently, we actually expanded our business with air purification side of the business. It's new to us, but we already see growth of revenue. As I mentioned, we just received results of the test of independent laboratories that proves it's our filters that are made by our technology is 99.9% efficient. And right now we are going with ISO certification, because a lot of European companies are interested in acquiring our conductive adhesives, but they require this ISO certification. It's going to be accomplished soon. We expanding this sales team and R&D projects, and we're about to start working with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the new project. So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention, and I would be happy to answer your questions.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yes.
Very informative presentation. So we will now start the Q&A portion of this webinar. Just a reminder to everyone on the line that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So before I ask this first question, just to give our viewers some context here, graphene was first theorized for decades ago, but it was only in 2004 that scientists discovered they can isolate it essentially by placing sticky tape on graphite or mica and then peeling it off and then dissolving the tape and leaving behind a thin layer of carbon, which is the graphene. So this was only in 2004. So the commercialization of graphene-based products is still very new. So as one of the first entrants into the space, tell us how commercial graphene oxide manufacturing works. How has the process changed, and how is the process evolving?
Well, first, from a commercial perspective, graphene exists in two forms roughly. One is the films, usually produced by chemical vapor deposition, some other process. And those films are used either for fast electronics, or it can be also deposited on the like a flexible plastic and make it a flexible, transparent conductor. And the other part is what we call powders. It's usually graphene in the forms of small flakes, and this is used as a battery material. It can also be used as additive nanofiller for polymers, either for conductivity or for improving mechanical properties. And there are a variety of methods of making the graphene platelets, but most scalable, I would say, it's a graphene oxide. And the graphene oxide, it's actually interesting material on its own. It has a lot of interesting properties. Still a single atomic layer, but it has areas where it's oxidized, and it can be dissolved in water. And that's why we focus on the expanding the production of graphene oxide, because it's easy way to go for commercial applications.
Interesting. So how did G6 come to be? When did you realize that there was a serious opportunity to break into graphene? Maybe just give us a historical background on the company and your involvement.
Yes, it was founded by myself and my wife Elena in the 2009. It was before the Nobel Prize. At this time, she was working as a scientist in the Columbia University, together with this other scientist who was studying graphene. And we see a lot of potential for the material, but we decided to see it as capitalize on its properties and try to actually commercialize it. So we see a lot of commercial potential at the moment. And since then, we were seeing a lot of progress being done in this industry.
Yeah, I guess speaking of progress that's done throughout the industry, what's your competition pool like, and how are you guys positioned differently?
Well, there is a lot of graphene companies available, but on the other hand, graphene companies doesn't really compete with each other, because there's also a lot of different applications for graphene, and each company kind of find its own application. Real competition is conventional materials, because graphene is still hard to work with, it's still expensive, and as I said, people don't really care what to use as long as it provides them a solution for the problem. And we basically competing with these alternative
Right.
approaches.
So we know that you have a big customer base. You mentioned universities, you mentioned NASA. I saw a Ford logo in your presentation. Mm-hmm. But who are your biggest customers, and what proportion of your total sales do your biggest customers represent?
We don't really have the biggest customers. Probably U.S. Army is the biggest, if I take. But on the other hand, we have a large spread of different customers, both academic and also, as I said, commercial. And right now, people are working on different kind of ideas, and we're helping them to actually provide them with the material and help them to realize the material potential. And the problem was always for us that we can make things work, but on the other hand, we didn't have really an opportunity to expand. And I think it's going to change with this GX acquisition. Now we have capital, and we have a clear plan how do we expand the production. And we are at the beginning of a very interesting story, I would say.
Right. So we have some questions on your patents. If I recall correctly, you've got 5 patents and 5 mm-hmm. more on the way. Which IPs specifically are you most excited about that maybe you could touch on?
It's a very good question. We have one patent that is not related to graphene, and this one we actually license out to a pharma company. The graphene patents, we have patent for separation, actually enriching graphene. So graphene will realize this, especially with the other ways to produce it. Sometimes it's the quality of the material is compromised because it's a large distribution of different flakes of different sizes. And one of the patents we have is how to improve the quality of graphene. And we can use essentially very cheap method of production of graphene and still make it work. Also, we have a patent that protecting our conductive epoxy formulations. And the graphene also can be used for making like it's battery material in a very, very unique way.
What kind of battery material? Like, are you talking, any kind of battery or specific?
No, one of the patents we have is that we can use 3D printing to actually print batteries. And we actually make a prototype of battery by make it a 3D printing material.
These are rechargeable batteries?
What we did, we just make a battery, non-rechargeable. But it gives, and it's like the idea is here that graphene can be added to a small amount of to material, make it conductive, and it allows actually to print a battery material.
Cool. Yeah, that's super interesting. And for those of us who aren't familiar with patents and how they work, can you tell us, is there an expiry date on these patents? Is it all the same date, or is it maybe just touch on that?
Yeah, usually when you have an idea, you start with actually making the first provisional application, which is you describe the idea in a free form and send it and register it with the patent office. Then it takes some time for patent office. In a year, you have to submit full patent application. In a small formal document, you have to describe every aspect of your invention. And after that, it takes some time for patent office to review the patent application. They want to make sure that the idea is unique, as it is not trivial. And if they pass this criteria, eventually patent office grants you a full patent. It's a long process. It requires a lot of communication with patent office and proving them that what they think as a prior art, maybe not relevant, maybe your idea is different than what they think is they found as a idea that's already invented. And then you have, I believe, 17 years until the patent expires.
Okay. Got some good color there. Did you guys acquire any IP property with the GX acquisition?
Yes, we did. We actually had two license, partially exclusive license for method of making the graphene and chitosan composites, which used for filtration.
So you touched on batteries, and we have someone who's asking about the use of graphene in the EV space, given its higher conductivity than silicon. So is it possible has it been theorized before a battery that uses graphene as anode material? Well,
graphene can be added for conductivity, and it's usually better materials than the carbon black, which you used in the batteries. And it's just more expensive. Right. But if you can make a better battery with graphene. This just doesn't make commercial sense unless you drop the price on the graphene, which we are planning to do.
Right. So the potential is there. We have a bunch of questions on the air purifier business.
Actually, to add to the battery side, it's actually possible to use graphene for making the next generation of batteries, because it's the way it works. Right now, this electrode material simply mixed with conductive component, but with the graphene, you can actually fine-tune it. You can use nanoparticles, and this is believed to be better battery.
Right. So yeah, we have some questions on the air purifier business. So yes. Have you guys? I'll start off with this. So earlier this month, you guys announced the results of your antimicrobial efficacy test for your graphene-based air purifier. And maybe just touch on these results again. Tell us, what are the next steps for commercialization?
Yeah, this test been done by independent laboratory. What they did, we supply them our air purifier with our filter, and they put this in a chamber, and they spray either bacteria or virus. They don't use COVID virus, they use some sort of proxy virus. And then they measure concentration over time, see how this concentration drops with time. And actually, it's the first report they provide us with says that in 2 hours, 99.9% of these microbes were eliminated. But later, they actually provide us with more detailed review, and we see that it has happened much sooner than in 2 hours. So this is how this test is done. Right now, the next step for commercialization is we have to actually get all this accreditation from government regulatory make sure that this product is safe to use. And once we got it, we will start offering. First, we will probably start offering this air purifier without our graphene filter, just this regular HEPA filter. And later, we will start offering this graphene filters as a next step, just because I anticipate that it's going to take us a little longer to get all the approvals for graphene filter.
Right. So you mentioned you didn't use COVID-19 virus, of course. You used some kind of proxy virus. Maybe explain that to us so we know.
Yeah, the current situation is that FDA realized it's important for people to develop like mitigation tools against viruses, and they mentioned this air purifier is one of them. And they said that we understand that it will be hard to get test done with the actual COVID virus. It's more expensive. So, but all the viruses are pretty much similar being. So if this air purifier works against another virus, which is similar by size and by properties as a COVID, then there is a highest chances that it's going to work for COVID as well. And right now we start seeing this little laboratories actually start offering this test with actual COVID virus. But as of now, it's FDA is satisfied if it works with just virus, any virus, and it's easier to done with the test with this proxy virus because the proxy usually they used bacteriophages that say easy to be detected.
And do you see a market for putting these purifiers on planes?
Yes, of course. We actually, one of the airlines contacted us, and they said that they want to use the technology once it's available. And they already have HEPA filters. It's just probably it's not going to be a large market because they don't change those filters too often.
Right. Okay, so on to the epoxy product. What's the 12-month outlook for the segment?
Now we have interest from two large European companies, and they are planning to use our products in their products. Now they actually setting up a production plant. So they've done a lot of testing for our products and make sure that it's work for them and for their processes. And so I would say that as any big companies, they start slow, but once they actually start mass producing this product, we will have quite sizable business.
Okay. And, you mentioned the ISO certification for your facility. Just remind us, what does this certification get you? And maybe when exactly do you expect to receive it?
Well, ISO certification is basically good manufacturing practices. So everything's supposed to be documented, all the processes, all this material is supposed to be checked and also documented. So it's just about the documentation and the established processes for everything. And we expect to have it maybe in a month. We're already working on this project for about 8 months, I would say.
Okay, great. So someone wants to know more about your marine composite business in Asia. Tell us about that and what's the outlook for it.
With the marine composites, we developed two formulations for marine composites together with a Singaporean company. And we were planning to actually build a prototype of the board. The problem we faced is that we didn't have enough capacity for graphene oxide manufacturing, because the board is going to take, we need to produce, I would say, 20 kilos of graphene oxide. And it was at the limit of our capacity at the moment. That's why because of the pandemic, this project kind of hindered. Right now, we're setting up this pilot plant, and we will have enough capacity for making this happen. And actually, I'm anticipate to first making the prototype, make sure that it works, and then I don't see a reason why we cannot offer the same material to other boat builders.
Right. And we'll touch on more of the corporate side now. So in May, you posted revenue of just under 2 million. You beat yearly revenue expectations in just 9 months of the fiscal year. So maybe touch on this, give us a hint as to what your revenue expectations are going forward, and when do you anticipate being cash flow positive?
It's a very good question. Right now, we're focused on the starting offering our brand of air purifier, and once we do it, I believe we should see growth in revenue. As of projections, we're about to publish in a couple of days financial results, annual financial statements, and you'll see these revenue numbers. Until then, I'm not really allowed to say anything.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess we'll find out shortly. As for insider ownership, what's that look like?
Between myself and Elena, my wife, we own approximately 10% each of the company, and there is other insiders having big chunks of the company shares, but I would say maybe 20%, and the rest is spread among a lot of people.
Right. And with the GX acquisition, are any of the members of their management team going to be reappointed to officers of G6?
Well, as of now, Tasa Arima is joined our board of directors, and Philman will be independent observer.
Okay, so that answers that. I'll quickly just scroll through some questions that I might have missed here. Can you use your technology to clean up lithium to battery grade? And have you considered exploring aluminum graphene batteries technology?
I would say it is possible, but it's on early stages of the development. Science has to be done first.
Right. And with everything reopening, well, not everywhere, but a lot of places are reopening now. Are you guys seeing more or less inquiries into graphene-based products?
Yes, of course, more, because a big part of our business is actually academia, universities, and on the lockdown, they start working from home, and we saw this decline in the demand for our product because they're not working in the labs. They don't really need any materials. And now we're seeing it's coming back and it's actually growing.
Right. So someone here wants to know the annual production capacity of graphene. I imagine you might need to clarify what it is that you guys manufacture and whatnot in answering this question.
It's a good question. I would say that before we have really kind of limited production capacity, and as I said, that with this board project, we couldn't really fulfill it because we don't have sufficient production. Now we're planning to expand it 5 times. And what's important is not how much graphene we produce, because it's, as I said, like for the boat project, I remember that water displacement for the boat was 3,000 kilos, and we need to produce 21 kilo of graphene oxide to make it happen. And it was at the limit of our capacity. Right now, we're planning to expand it 5-fold within a couple of months.
Right. Can you tell us more about your marketing and public awareness efforts recently? And are you guys going to be doing more of that now that this acquisition is behind you?
Yes, absolutely. And we have a lot of, as this, our story develops, we will have more and more to say to our shareholders and the outside world.
Okay. So I'll ask two more questions here. This one's interesting. So will the graphene-based products in the future play a role with dealing with the current climate change crisis? Are there solutions that graphene can help with there?
Well, everything climate related is how to better use electricity, right? And the graphene is as I mentioned, can be useful for better batteries.
Right. And yeah, you mentioned solar cells as well. I imagine that that would play a role as well.
One of the interesting projects, our project, is when this graphene is used for like a transparent solar cell. It's being deposited on a windows, and it's kind of tint the windows of office windows a bit, but it's actually this windows start produce electricity. I would say this is an interesting application.
For sure. So we'll wrap it up here, but in maybe 3 key points, tell us why you think investors should be paying attention to G6 Materials.
Well, we're on the verge of actually converting the company, expanding really fast. And we have very unique products and applications.
Right. So with that, Daniel, we'll leave it there. Daniel, thanks a ton for joining us. It's been a pleasure hosting you.
It's been a pleasure.
To our viewers, if you want to learn our thoughts on G6 as well as other companies that we watch, we do publish all of our research on our website, totally free of charge. Just a reminder that our next webinar will take place Monday morning. David Talbot will be sitting down with Lotus Resources to discuss uranium. That is September 27th at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a great day. And thanks again, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.